Back in 2016, when No Man's Sky released, like many others, I was absolutely sold on the promise Hello Games had made. Interestingly enough, that game company, Hello Games, had only made some mobile games before that, successful mobile games, but mobile games nonetheless. So coming up with a procedurally generated, near infinite space game with every feature one could want or imagine should have sounded too good to be true, especially for them at the time being only a 4-man team. But we all fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. Completely based on hype, what we all wanted, what we all needed, what we all desperately yearned for, the infinite sandbox space game. And it makes sense because for anyone who is remotely interested in sci-fi, being able to create or fly your own ship, go to different planets, explore, build, create with your friends felt like absolute freedom. Most space games before this, heck, even games in general, heavily leaned into loading screens. But finally, a game without loading screens? Yes. I'm not going to do a full retrospective of this game because that's already been done before. I recommend this video if you're looking for that. But what I want to talk about is the state of the game today. Like others in 2016, when the game first came out, I was straight up confused. I finished the tutorial, flew to a couple planets, and very quickly realized I had basically finished the game. None of the promised features were there. It was a disaster. So I deleted it and went about my life. 4 years later, around late 2019, I picked up the game again with a friend. And after seeing how much they updated the game, I actually quite enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun. I didn't play that much, only about 30 hours, but it was still really fun. However, still many features that I wanted out of a space game were not there. Mainly building your own ship. Well, with the release of the new Voyagers update, I figured I'd try it again with a fresh view. I started up a new save, and what I was met with was emptiness. Almost 10 years has passed since the game first released, and so my perspective on games is a little different now. I expect more depth as my experience playing different games has grown. Now, as I go into my qualms about the game today, just know I do love this game. It's an absolute one of a kind, and I'm very grateful for the devs to continue to update and develop this game. There are things I don't like about the game that I'm about to talk about, but they're just my opinion, so take it with a grain of salt. And if you honestly disagree, let me know why in the comments. I'm perfectly happy with being wrong. Now, I want to start by talking about the multiplayer because I think that's where the most widespread problem is with this game today. The implementation feature-wise for how it works is what I would call fine. It's not good, it's not great, it's not horrible, it's just fine. You can visit other players' bases, fly your ship around with your friends, and do some missions together. However, it's only just fine when it actually works. Most of the time, this is not the case. The amount of bugs and issues I faced in just a short amount of time trying to play with my friend was troubling. And what's more troubling, after doing some research into these bugs, they're not only common, they're everywhere, and players have been dealing with them for years. And it's just been ignored by the devs. Ironically, when I booted up the game to get some footage for this video, this is what I was met with as soon as I loaded in.
The amount of
Radiation protection falling.
It's just ridiculous, man.
I wish you could see my screen.
Radiation protection.
The game just nuked me into fucking space and I'm not even in my ship. A pretty hilarious bug, but just ironic considering I just loaded into the game. One of the worst bugs I dealt with was the known land regeneration bug. Over time, the land will slowly regenerate and take over your base. Players of the game have two solutions. One of them is to build your base on stilts, which is what I usually opted for, which just kind of sucks because that means you can't build any underground bunkers. And the other solution is to make up your own headcanon that the Sentinel drones are slowly filling up the land. With base building being such a large portion of this game, this is just frankly unacceptable. The problem is worse when you factor in multiplayer. My friend was trying to show me his base. On his screen, it looked absolutely fine, but on my screen, it was covered in rock. I could still see the base poking through, but most of the base was inaccessible due to the amount of land that had regenerated on top of it. I thought to myself, no problem, I'll just dig a hole to eventually find the door. Nope, you're not allowed to build on your friend's base. And what's worse, he couldn't see the rock, so he couldn't break it for me to be able to get in. So the base was just there, straight up impossible for me to get into. Really annoying. I wish I could say bugs like this were rare, but unfortunately they're not. They're actually super common. Without getting too into the weeds, we just had so many issues with constant disconnections. For example, every time we'd warp, there was about a 50% chance we'd get disconnected and had to reconnect to each other. Or if we tried to go into the anomaly together, even if we flew in at the same time, nope, not allowed. You have to join on separate instances, which means you can't see your friend in the anomaly. Weird considering that it's the multiplayer hub of the game. Or we'd visit each other's bases, and for some reason we couldn't see each other or see each other's ships. Or other times NPC ships would spawn, and for some reason one of us could see them, but the other ones couldn't, meaning we both couldn't interact with the NPC event. And lastly, and this was probably the most personally annoying for me, was we couldn't see each other's bases seemingly randomly in the warp menu. Sometimes we could, sometimes we couldn't. They would just show up on a whim, and other times they would disappear. This made it really difficult to go to each other's bases because it meant we had to manually warp there in our ships, which can take a long time depending where you are in the game. So the whole thing just didn't feel seamless. It felt rushed and gritty, full of friction. So much friction just to play with a friend. Multiplayer has been a feature for years too, so in my opinion this is just unacceptable. It's barely functional, feels hacked together, and the community has known about it for years. The next thing I want to talk about is the story. If you really take your time, play on normal difficulty, and explore the game a little as you play, I'd say it takes about 10-ish hours to get to the anomaly, the stage of the game where you can fully ignore the story and the tutorial essentially ends. Storytelling is the undergirding of how humans communicate with each other. Good storytelling is the difference between remembering and forgetting what other people tell you. No Man's Sky fails to be an effective communicator of its story. The game thrusts you into an unfamiliar universe and doesn't give you any help figuring out who you are, what you are, or the biggest issue in my opinion, why you should even care. And just to be clear, I don't always hate this style of storytelling. I enjoy sometimes being thrust into an unfamiliar world. The first Dune movie, the first Maze Runner movie, the first season of The Witcher, all do this really effectively. You're a bit confused and lost at the beginning, but very quickly you put together what's going on. It's kind of fun, like a slowly revealing mystery. The difference with No Man's Sky, however, though, is it just doesn't give me a reason to care. I tried so hard to figure out what was going on. It just forces so much jargon so quickly and takes you to different places that are procedurally generated and can all start to blend together. And very quickly as this is happening, everything everyone has said to you becomes a blur. It doesn't help either that half the people you speak to, you can't even understand because you don't speak the languages of seemingly anybody in this universe. Additionally, the main story characters speak to you in absolute riddles. It makes it extremely difficult to get immersed. And on top of all this, the quests basically consist of constantly playing fetch. Go here, get this, go here, get this, nothing more. And because of the procedural generation, you don't feel like you're actually having an impact. This is one of the most important things in storytelling, to give the audience a reason to care. It's the only way they're going to get emotionally invested in the story. And I really did try to get in the story. And again, if you liked the story, if you found it fun, I'm happy for you. But for me, it just felt shallow and it felt like there was no depth. And the more I tried to understand it and I tried to dig into it, the more confused I was left. One possible way they could get the audience to become more immediately interested in the story is by establishing a goal early on related to figuring out who they are by using characterization. And this is where I think the game faltered. Stories are interesting to us because we care about the characters and what happens to them. If No Man's Sky had a little more depth in its characterization and perhaps took some time to explain who I am in the game, or perhaps a side character guiding us, I think many players would be a lot more interested. Part of the struggle is not understanding the language or getting lost in the strong lean towards poetry. I think those aspects of the game could stay and be benefited by giving the player a companion and benefactor who can basically accompany them on their journey and give them more reasons to continue. The sense of loneliness the game gives you could still be there, but at least you'll have a reason to keep striving. This could also become an interesting aspect in the game later on, by having this benefactor die, leave you, turn against you, or even disappear. There's so many options. Having this NPC who you care about early on would drive your ambition to delve into the lore and the story in a deeper way that I think the game is currently missing. And just to add a cherry on top, you can't even hide missions from the bottom right of the screen. So if you want to ignore the missions, you simply can't. And veteran players' solution to this is just to ignore the prompt. The next thing I want to talk about is the balancing of the game. I usually play most games on normal difficulty, as I find normal difficulty usually has the best balance of challenge to reward. I found the default balancing in this game to be a little bit silly. Lots of mining, constantly interrupting your exploration in order to recharge your launch thrusters, then your pulse engine, and then your hyperdrive. It can be quite tedious at times. I made some changes in the difficulty settings and started having a much better time playing this game. It's grindy on default, but if you custom tailor it to your liking, I found that you can have an awesome experience. I set my resources to abundant and made my fuel setting use less, and it made the game 10 times more playable and fun. I do think some of these changes should probably be default, but I gotta give the game massive credit for the customization. The devs did a great job allowing the players to be able to make the gameplay truly theirs. This next one's going to be a bit funny when I mention it, and you're probably used to this if you're a gamer, but Google is required to play this game. Now, most survival sandbox games do struggle with this, but you're going to have to Google absolutely everything to figure out this game. Now, to be fair, this game does a decent job of teaching you the basics during the tutorial. I will give it credit for that. But as soon as you go even a little bit deep into the game mechanics, I think you'll find you'll need to Google absolutely everything. Now, I mostly think this is because the UI is a bit clunky and unintuitive. Once you get used to it, it's not the worst thing in the world, but it takes a lot of practice. And fortunately, you can find most things online, although the community doesn't seem to be as big as some other games that I've played. This next one may seem a bit odd, but I think rewards in this game are a little bit weird. And I found the progression and reward system overall just to be odd because of the balancing. As an exploration game, you'd think you'd be rewarded by exploring, and that's true in some regard, but not in others. The main currencies are nanites and credits. I guess you could consider salvage a form of currency also. Nanites for tech upgrades, and credits for buying tech or ships. And you'll need salvage in order to research new tech. To get salvage, which you need to progress in this game, the game teaches you to look for these little Wi-Fi symbols, follow them, dig a little bit, and open them up, and boom, you get a little bit of salvage. But this gets old fast. It's tedious, slow, and frankly boring. But even weirder to me is the credit system. The primary way the game teaches you to get credits is by scanning things and doing missions. Now, I actually don't mind these mechanics. Doing missions is fun, although can be a bit annoying in a sandbox game, but the scanning is what leaves me really confused. Now, I actually like this mechanic. Sure, it's a bit boring after a while because everything just starts to look like a nuclear homunculus, but at least it encourages exploration in an exploration game. However, it gives such a tiny amount of credits that you're basically so poor, you can't buy anything. This was super clear to me during the tutorial when it asked me to buy a wiring loom, and I still couldn't afford it even after scanning what felt like a million things. Scanning a tree or scanning an animal will give you roughly between 500 and 3,000 credits, but to buy an actual ship or anything worth value will cost you millions. An S-class ship costs you tens of millions. Missions are a little better if you care to do them, but the game also has super generous mechanics in terms of finding ships. For what's about an hour's worth of work, if you find a dissonant planet, you can find a Sentinel ship and sell it for about 30 million credits. See how it doesn't make sense? On one hand, you have an intended mechanic that encourages exploration but keeps you poor. On the other hand, you can just find a massive broken ship pretty easily and boom, never worry about money again. It's just unbalanced and makes the game feel pointless because the progression is just unsatisfying. All this to say, I still really love this game, and I couldn't put a finger on why until now. Albeit my personal balancing changes to the refueling requirements, I've actually had a really good time playing this game. Something about the exploration aspect and the freedom to travel between planets is just so fun. And although it's procedurally generated, the visuals, ship mechanics, and game systems make you feel like you're actually exploring a new place. But where the real fun is, in my opinion, is when you make the game objective yours and do what you want to do. Stop treating it like a mission to complete and instead treat it like a sandbox. Set your own goals and follow those instead. Just remember to ignore the mission prompt on the bottom right. That's to me where the journey becomes the reward and the game becomes super fun. The thing I kept reading on Reddit threads over and over and over again, and that took a while to really set in for me, is that I needed to stop hyper-focusing on the game mechanics, just sit back and relax. The journey is the reward. Having fun in this game for me meant literally ignoring all the quests. No Man's Sky is what I believe to be a flawed, but ultimately unique and amazing game. I highly recommend it despite its flaws. But these are just what I believe are some things that could be fixed or make the game better. Thanks for watching.